Dewars Double Blended Scotch Whiskies. What are these like, and should you grab them? Stay tuned for the Whiskey Whistle. What up, my whiskey people? Mark Kaufman here for Whiskey Whistle on YouTube, sharing a little whiskey awesomeness from Winnipeg, Winterpeg, the center of North America, bringing you a 3-up of Dewars blended Scotch whiskies. They're double whiskeys, double matured for extra ultimate smoothness, whatever it says. Anyway, so these are an interesting set of whiskeys that are fairly reasonable in price, like $50 for the 21 half bottle, about $80 for the 27. Again, that's a half bottle, and about $120 or $150 for the 32-year-old, which is also a half bottle. So first of all, we'll get these poured, and we'll talk about what's the deal with these. So first of all, they're all 46% ABV. Yes, they're all unchill filtered. Also, yes. And they are all natural in color. Fantastic. Woo. That's great. That is a big change for these big brands. And they know that this is what's needed to get people to buy their excellent whiskeys. Okay, the 27-year-old. The 21-year-old, after all said and done, is finished in Oloroso casks. The 27-year-old, after all said and done, is finished in Palo Cortado sherry casks. And the 32-year-old, after all said and done, is finished in PX sherry casks. There we go. Now, this is my second take of this. So I've already got the whiskeys with water added, so that'll make things a little bit faster. But first of all, we want to check out the color of these three whiskeys. And before we do that, though, let's talk about the process. So I'll put a picture up of this here. But the unique 4-stage process, which Dewars calls their double aged. Let me just explain this very simply. So it's a blended Scotch whiskey. You've got a blend of single grain whiskeys and a blend of single malt whiskeys. Now, they blend them in a very particular way. They've got all these casks of single grain whiskeys. So let's say there's 3 casks. They take those casks that have aged for 21 years, maybe 20 or whatever, and they blend them together and then put them back in oak casks. Okay? And then the same step, they've got all these different single malts, which have been aged for 21 years. Then they blend them together and they put them back in casks. Okay, so that's step 1. Then step 2, well, it's really step 3. Step 3, they take the blended grain casks and the blended malt casks, and they blend those together, creating a blended Scotch whiskey, and they further age them in oak casks. Okay? And then after that aging, then they take that blended Scotch whiskey and they put them into sherry casks, Oloroso, Palo Cortado, and PX for a finishing period, which I'm guessing is a good length of time based on how sherry influenced these are. Okay, so that's the story here. Let's check the color out of these. I'll just move these to the side and bring these together. Okay. So the color, first of all, what do we see for color? Something rather coppery for the 21-year-old. A little bit darker, like a brassy note is coming in the 27-year-old. And look how dark this 32-year-old is. It's mahogany. It's very dark, well beyond polished oak. It's supremely dark. And again, it's fantastic to know that this is natural in color. So excellent. Okay, we'll check out the legs together. I'll do each. We'll do the 21 first, then we'll do the 27 and 32 together. I've already, I've already reviewed the 21 against Johnnie Walker 21-year-old XR, and the Dewars 21 lost, but only because of the, let's say, the classic whiskey flavor that you get in the Johnnie Walker 21. All right, what do we see for legs? Fairly slow to start. That's rather encouraging. Oh yeah, quite slow. Looking very, very good. So that tells you a lot about the strength, the content, this process that these have been in, or they've been moved 4 times, 4 different casking. The secondary legs, very, very slow here. Okay, all right, let's look at the 27 and the 32-year-old together for legs. Okay, so what do we see for legs here? A little bit faster to start for the 27-year-old. Much slower, much thicker for the 32, as one would expect. And we should have some really nice mouthfeel here for both of these. All 3 of these, in fact. That's really, really encouraging. Excellent. Okay, so we'll get into the 21-year-old first of all. And before we do that, don't forget to subscribe to Whiskey Whistle. That link is right over here. Click the bell, ding, ding, so you're notified of future Whiskey Whistles. And if you're enjoying the content here on Whiskey Whistle and you like what I'm doing, why not support the channel and jump in and become a patron on Patreon. Patreon.com/WhiskyWhistle. You'll get your name in the credits at the end of each video. You'll also get advanced viewership of future Whiskey Whistles. And last but not least, you can earn yourself a custom Whiskey Whistle Glencairn glass with enough support for the channel. The threshold, I think, is about 3 months or thereabouts. All right. Okay, so the 21-year-old, again, I've already reviewed that, but we'll go through that again and give it a new Whiskey Whistle whiskey score. Right off the bat, you do know that it's a blended Scotch whiskey, especially if you're experienced. If you're underexperienced, you might think that it is a mix of bourbon and sherry casks and something like a lowland or a lighter Highland style. We've got some great toffee notes. That grain is coming through crisp and very, very delicate. I don't overtly get sherry on the nose here for the 21. I do get a little bit of leather, a little bit of old books. And it's coming through as a really elegant, well-made blended Scotch whiskey. There's a little hint of something kind of umami in there, kind of like a little drop of balsamic vinegar, or even just like a little smidgen of something like Worcester sauce added into that fruitiness. All right, on to the palate. Cheers, folks. The palate is where the sherry shines here. Really, really sweet. That Oloroso cask, the final cask for the 21 is Oloroso. It's really overtaking the palate altogether. It's just a very sweet, delicious palate. Some dark fruits, some fresh red fruits. That little hint of something umami. There is a dollop of peated malt here, I believe. And it's really making this a really well-rounded event. So a touch of little tiny puffs of smoke there. Long, sweet finish, a little bit dry, but overall just very, very tasty. A lot of people would not figure that that is a blended Scotch whiskey on the palate. On the nose, they might say yes, but the palate, if you give it to them blind, they would be very confused by this whiskey. Definitely an older style of whiskey, but juxtaposed with the more modern kind of like sherry influence that a lot of whiskeys have, the cask influence that a lot of whiskeys have today. Okay, so with water, I've got that right here. Let's check that out together. I think I added about 2 to 3 milliliters of water here. Much more grain forward, but it's really old grain. Dusty. Rye whiskey lovers would like this. Old Canadian rye whiskey lovers. I mean, the whiskey's old, not the lover, not the whiskey lover. Oh yeah, that toffee note there, still very, very potent. Some crisp apple. Beautiful. The palate with water. Some sherry notes, but also this really great, elegant tannin dryness, kind of enveloping the palate. We've got a bit of straight up, not candy, just dried orange rind, some lemon pith. Really, really enjoyable. This is a rock star as a blended Scotch whiskey. And tasted blind, people would think that this was a very, very high quality aged single malt or blended malt Scotch whiskey. All right, excellent. We'll get into the WhiskyWhistle whiskey score for Dewars 21-year-old double double. What is that going to be, folks? It's going to be 90 out of 100. You heard it, 90 out of 100 is the WhiskyWhistle whiskey score for Dewars double double 21. Needs a malt? No, needs a blend hug. A nice whiskey hug and a little whiskey kiss. Mwah. Great stuff. Okay, so that's exciting. Well, let's get right into the 27-year-old, what am I saying? Are you excited? All right, well, let's get right into the Dewars 27-year-old double double, finished, finally matured in Palo Cortado sherry casks. Ooh, really interesting. Now, a little bit of information about the sherry. We've got Oloroso, which is oxidized. That's why it's a darker sherry. It's pretty sweet, but lots and lots of rich flavors. We have the Palo Cortado, which starts out as an unoxidized sherry, kind of like Fino or Amontillado, and then it loses its floor, the layer that's protecting it from oxidation, which then becomes oxidized like Oloroso, so it's somewhere in between. Finally, the PX, which is the sweetest of the sherries, and that is also heavily oxidized. Okay, so the 27-year-old, super old flavors here. Leather, straight up leather, old leather, baseball glove leather, oiled baseball glove leather, library. I can definitely sense the sherry here now. And it smells like an old sherry influenced blended Scotch whiskey. Yes, it does smell like a blended Scotch whiskey on the nose. If you pour it just right off the bat and smell it, you might be overwhelmed by the sherry, but you let it sit in the glass for the appropriate amount of time, which is about 27 minutes, and the whiskey will tell you what it is. All right. Some cocoa. Just a little bit of Tootsie Roll cocoa, hot chocolate. Smells really, really good. Let's get into the palate. Cheers, folks. Delicious. That leather, the old books, and this sherry that really, really influences things here. We've got prunes, we've got dried raisins, a little bit of something. Even here, a little bit of something umami, kind of like that Worcester sauce going on. Bright, crisp, some nice dryness in there. Good tannins working together with all those fruit flavors. Woo! Very, very potent. Let me take a little bit of water here. All right, so now with water, let's see how things change. Again, that's about 2 or 3 milliliters of water added. More cocoa, a little bit less grain, single grain whiskey notes here. We still have the leather, we still have the old books, you know, the hallmarks of aged single malt Scotch whiskey. But more cocoa, more chocolate, that sounds great. Onto the palate with water. Wow. You really get a sense of the age here. You're definitely tasting something that is, well, beyond a quarter century in this case. I was 20, maybe 19 when this was made, when these, the original whiskeys, the original distillates were distilled. I think I just aged myself there. Again, that beautiful little bit of Worcester sauce added into all these fruit flavors. Prunes, a bit of date. Some fresh, boy, what is it? A little bit of durian. Very, very interesting. Well, on to the WhiskyWhistle whiskey score for Dewars Double 27-year-old. What is that going to be, folks? It's going to be 92 out of 100. You heard it, 92 out of 100 is the WhiskyWhistle whiskey score for Dewars Double 27-year-old. Needs a whiskey kiss and a whiskey hug. Great stuff if you want to try old whiskey, old Scotch whiskey, whether single malt or blended, and you want to know what it tastes like, and you don't want to spend much money, then this is the way to go. This 27-year-old. $80-ish in Canada, so that's a great price. Okay, on to the 32-year-old finished in PX casks, the Dewars Double. Let's check that out together. super, super old notes here. All of those things, the leather, the library, the old oak, polished oak, and then you add some shoe polish, some dubbin wax for shoes, as well as some, like, you know, black or brown shoe polish. Cocoa, toffee, dark brown sugar. On this nose, I get no smells of single grain or blended grain so far. It's really coming off as a single malt, but keep in mind, 32 years old in oak. How much of the smells and tastes are original distillate? Probably 5%, if you're lucky 10, maximum 15, I would say. Great. Okay, onto the palate. Cheers. Very mouth-filling, very sumptuous. Cocoa. Dark prune. Like Vina Tarta again. We still have the leather, the church pew furniture, the library oak, library books, the volumes, the rotting paper. Now, I want to try to keep this for 32 seconds in my mouth. The spice builds, the chocolate builds, the sweetness builds. It's not too harsh on your palate, keeping it in that long. Really, really enjoyable. I highly recommend you try that. A lot more of the flavor coming through there, but again, it's really a cask show here. The original casks were great. The secondary casks were great. The tertiary casks were great. And these PX casks were outstanding. Okay, one more sip here. Now, with water, let's see what happens here. You do get a sense of the grain with water added here. So that kind of unravels the DNA of this malt, of this blend, pardon me, really. It's still, I mean, obviously it's very old. All of these old flavors are coming through. And I want to smell my coffee here for a second. Okay. Dark toffee, the brown sugar, the leather, the cocoa. That little bit of grain scent coming through still. Okay, so that's interesting. The palate with water. Cheers again, folks. Not much has changed. Again, there's something slightly peaty working in there. 32-year-old peated whiskey, peated malt, peated single malt. Almost losing all of its smokiness and adding all these fruity, weird fruity flavors in there. Kind of like an IPA with all the hops. Really, really malty. I think we have a higher malt proportion here, is my guess. That would explain the jump in price. It's a beautiful whiskey. Well worth it here. Yeah, a little bit more of the single grain, the blended Scotch whiskey coming through on the nose with water. But the palates, not much has changed. All right, so on to the WhiskyWhistle whiskey score for Dewars Double 32-year-old. What is that going to be, folks? It's going to be 94 out of 100. You heard it, 94 out of 100 is the WhiskyWhistle whiskey score for Dewars Double 32-year-old. Needs a whiskey hug. Oh, and a big, big whiskey kiss. Mwah, mwah. Wonderful stuff. I highly recommend it. These are all worth the money. And if you're wanting to try out blends that are on the cutting edge of modern whiskey palates, on the cutting edge of meeting modern whiskey palates, these are them. Okay, so check them out. Dewars 21, 90 points, about $50 for a half bottle. Dewars 27, 92 points, half a bottle. And Dewars 32-year-old, half a bottle, 94 points. Makes sense. The most malty is the 32-year-old. The most malty is the 32-year-old. The 21 and the 27, you do get a sense of them being blended Scotch whiskies, but you add water and they all present as themselves, which are excellent, well-aged, beautiful blended Scotch whiskies. So hats off to Dewars, Bacardi for these. These are fantastic. And to the whiskey maker, I think her name is Stephanie. Stephanie McLeod, well done. What's next? What's next? We can't wait. Anyway, thanks everybody. Take care. Make sure you leave a comment down below. We'll see you for the next one. Bye now.